So welcome guys, and this video would look at the objectives of ethics and the scope of ethics in the first place. So by objectives of ethics we mean what we seek to achieve by the mere existence of ethical principles in society, the introduction of ethics in organized society, what would be the specific intent, and what are the kind of results we want to have, what exactly are the foundations that you want to establish by having ethics in society. But secondly, and more importantly, the scope of ethics would want to investigate what are the broad-based paradigms of ethics. That's to say that what are the established areas of interest in terms of ethics, and how do we integrate them particularly. And that's what today's video is about, and we hope we have an interesting discussion moving forward. So with the objectives of ethics, for every existence of ethical framework in society, we would want to, one, achieve objectivity. That is to say that anything that is codified to be right or wrong would have to come from a neutral perspective other than individual subjective opinions. What does this mean? It means that you cannot unilaterally decide on what you think is the right thing in society, or what you think is moral and what you think is immoral. You cannot unanimously do that. It means that society has to come into a consensus to agree on the averages of what indeed constitutes a right action or wrong. It means that morality in itself is defined and determined by the society, organized society, and not individuals in the first place. That is what it means that ethical framework seeks to establish objectivity, because then the absence of ethics, the absence of these normative definitions and rules will mean that everybody could just wake up and think that what they are doing is the right thing to do and all of that. So ethics really seeks to establish objectivity. But the next thing is that ethics would seek to bring on board impartiality. It means that every judgment of morality should be impartial, devoid of biases, and should be one that is plain and open to the fairest middle ground that everybody can relate to, and not skewed towards the interest of any other person. And it means that ethics would have to aspire to be accurate. A decision or a judgment of right and wrong should be accurate in the first place to be able to be binding and guiding to guide people's behavior. That's really important as well. The next thing is that an objective of ethics would be to establish frameworks for public accountability. That means that once we know the principles, once we know the frameworks, once we define the codes, then we can be able to hold people accountable. We can be able to tell whether your action constitutes right or wrong, especially public officers who are handling administrative jobs of public interest. We can be able to tell whether they acted in good interest of the people or in good faith, and we can be able to judge their actions and demand accountability, demand them to act in our interest. That is one of the objectives of ethics in the first place. It also seeks to establish systems of fairness, because ethics exist in organized societies, and the foundations of organized society and why that organized society is different from the state of nature, that is to say the jungle where there are no rules, is that justice is the fundamental of organized society. So if justice is the fundamental of organized society, we can hold individuals responsible, we can demand accountability, we can be able to enforce rules established by ethical codes. Then it means that ethics really established a scheme of fairness or fair treatment for every person in society, and that is one of the objectives that ethics has. Another thing is truthfulness, because by having these kind of principles and consensus definition and establishment of right and wrong, we can be able to separate truth from falsehood. We can be able to separate right from wrong, and we can be able to separate what the correct moral framework should be from what is actually wrong in the first place. And so those are the objectives of ethics for which we want to establish a society guided by ethical frameworks, and that is really important. Objectivity, impartiality, accuracy, public accountability, fairness, and justice, then truthfulness in the large scheme. So what are the scope of ethics? What are the areas that ethics will be interested? What are the paradigms? What are the broad-based foundations of ethics? We have three of them. One is meta ethics, second is normative ethics, and the third is applied ethics. So with normative ethics, it's really what establishes the criteria. But let's first look at what meta ethics is about. Meta ethics would seek to investigate and seek to understand, explain the nature of moral or ethical statements, the nature of ethical principles, the nature of ethical facts, so that we can be able to know what is a good moral decision, what constitutes goodness, how is goodness, even if a good or ethical framework exists, how does it look like, and how can we be able to differentiate right from wrong? How does right look like inherently in the first place? What are the characteristics? How do we know that this is right? How do we separate that this is right and that is wrong? That is what meta ethics will seek to investigate. So it's an approximation towards the ideal type of world. It means that how do we have a separation of the ideal standard from the non-idealized standard? And that is meta ethics. An examination of what the nature of right and wrong should be. And that is it. With normative ethics, what it does is that with the idea from meta ethics, where we can be able to tell how goodness looks like, how bad looks like, how good decisions are and how wrong decisions are, we then use normative ethics, which in itself is a step-by-step or systematic or scientific application of meta ethics to be able to tell what the right thing to do is. So it means that normative ethics will be able to set the standard or set the criteria of what we should actually do, knowing the nature of right and wrong from meta ethics. Then normative ethics will be able to establish the codes or the standards on what's the right thing to do. So while meta ethics, for example, would answer questions such as how does the good idea looks like, what is wrong, what is bad, what is the nature of good or wrong, normative ethics would be able to answer questions such as what should I do, what is the right thing to do, and how should I act. And that is really important. Ladies and gentlemen, the next paradigm baseline of ethics is applied ethics. In this case, we would be able to apply the knowledge that we get from meta ethics and the codes or criteria established from normative ethics in a particular circumstance, in a particular jurisdiction. So for example, in the medical profession, we can be able to contextualize, personalize those ethical frameworks and know how we should be able to solve certain problems that arise. That is to say that using the two ethical frameworks that I've talked about, meta ethics and normative ethics, to be able to solve problems. It means that applied ethics is problem solving. It helps us to be able to arrive at decisions that can be able to resolve problems, frictions in society, and have an approximation towards the ideal world of what Aristotle thinks is eudaimonia. And we'll talk about that later on. So today we talked about the objectives of ethics, we talked about the scope of ethics, meta ethics seeking to explain the nature and perspective of ethical frameworks and what moral facts are in the first place. Then normative ethics seeking to set the standards and criteria to tell us what the right thing to do is and what we should do. Then applied ethics being able to personalize or contextualize these particular ethical frameworks to solve problems in order to give us the kind of desired society that we want to. Your other videos will tackle subsequent things about the details of ethical theories and all of that. But before then, kindly subscribe to this channel so you get notified about any new video that I post. And secondly, don't forget to share and like these videos. Thank you very much, and God bless you.